Can you help him turn on the sound?
Yes.
No hurry.
There's might be the little box.
I haven't even thought about it. I'll need a check eventually. To cover the cost. Okay. Is it on now?
Yeah.
Yay. We're cooking with gas. Is that what it said? Something like that. I was never hip, so all my expressions will be old. And I mean, I was never hip. Never, never. It's not just the robes. It never happened. So, yeah, it has to be all right. I'm not into hip anyway. That's my rationalization. Okay. So I just want to make some announcements first because I'm afraid I'll forget them if I don't make them now, but that's probably not correct. But anyway, I'm going with that. So we have some members of, that come regularly that at the moment don't have access to a car, so they need help getting here. So it would really be nice if people who come regularly or not so regularly would perhaps tell Nicole how you can be reached so that we can connect the people that need rides. Like I know there's someone in Margate that needs rides regularly. There's someone in West Boca that doesn't always need rides, but will again in the future. But anyway, that's all I can think of at the moment. But, you know, people get sick, people get, you know, and then they just, and if we really want to be part of, you know, have that feeling of community, that's a way that can really help is, you know, to feel comfortable going ahead and saying, yes, I will come this day, and yes, I can bring you. Because I know a lot of the hesitation of volunteering is we don't really want to commit to any particular day that we want to come. So we want to leave our options free to decide on the morning going, oh, I don't feel like going. So, you know, I know this mind very well. So anyway, but it would be nice if we had a list of people with their email addresses or something so that, you know, we can try to connect people. Otherwise, what we have is that one person ends up driving someone all the time, and then they get burned out. So, you know, we need to share the generosity. So, that's my answer. All right, so now we can clear our mind of all our planning by just settling our mind on our bodies being here. So just gently bring your attention to like the sensations of your body sitting in a chair or on the cushion. The sensation of the temperature of the room. And we can scan our body to see if there's any particular points of tension. And then by using the breath, just breathe into those points and perhaps they will relax. We can take a few deep breaths and then just relax our attention on the sensation of the breath going in and out of the nose. can rest in knowing that there's no other place we need to be. We've chosen to be here. And let go of the thoughts about the past. And not follow the thoughts of planning for later. In order to use our time well, we can try to generate a positive intention. You know, bring whatever motivation brought you here, and then create a positive intention to use your time well. We can combine this positive intention with the wish that it be of benefit, not only to ourselves, but to ripple out to benefit those around us. So once again, bring your attention to your body sitting here. And with the awareness that there are other people around us, gently open your eyes and join the class. There's always so many more people here when I open my eyes. Oh. New faces. All right. Anybody new here today, the first time? Hi, my name's Tendrin. So I'm a Buddhist nun, and you're stuck with me today. So, hello, welcome.
Thank you.
We will introduce each other a little later on when everybody looks forward. So, all right. So how's your mind today? Anybody look? It's a barrel of monkeys. I bet it's not.
Needs a tether.
It needs a tether. Okay. Took me a while to catch what you were saying. Oh. So we've been talking lately about mindfulness of feeling, mindfulness of the body, which is just the Buddhist way of saying that we try to bring our thoughts, our attention of the mind onto a specific spot, like the body, and then we become aware of the sensations that we're feeling in the body without chasing them, without creating a story around them, just noticing. So we notice the pressure of the chair, the cushion on our legs. We might notice it on our backs. We notice whether we're hot or cold. And we learn how to just be attentive without creating a story around it. Just notice. Oh, that spot's tense. Not, why is that spot tense? or I have to move because that spot is tense, or anything. Just simply notice. And then we can take the next step of noticing the feeling that arises with our different sensations. And they can be of body or mind. And feeling has a very specific meaning in Buddhism, and that's the feeling. It's the word means to experience, and so the three experiences we have are pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. So we're not talking about the complex thoughts and emotions that we have when we're talking about feeling, just simply the feeling of pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. And this is one way we uncover our preferences, because we tend to like what is pleasant and not like what is unpleasant, and we're rather indifferent to what is neutral. So we have a tendency to be very attached to sensation. We like sensation. We prefer positive sensation. But we tend to chase sensation around. You know, if we don't like the sensation we're feeling, we try to get rid of it. If we like the sensation we are feeling, we want more of it. But again, when you're bringing your attention to the feeling, you're not trying to follow it with a story. This is just about developing the practice of being able to attend to the different things that are happening to us in the moment. And that helps us separate the sensation or the feeling and the thoughts we put around it, so that we can slowly get more in tune with how our mind interprets what's happening to us. So a few weeks ago, we listened to a clip on Ernie wanting to borrow a vacuum cleaner. Ernie's a Sesame Street character. So Geshe Gelek in North Carolina was saying, oh, this really captures the Buddhist idea of nam talk. Nam talk is the story, the chatter we have going on in our head. And it's often about the future. So poor Ernie needs a vacuum cleaner because his broke. So he goes, he knows his neighbor has a vacuum cleaner. So he goes to borrow it, and before he's knocked on the door of his neighbor, he starts thinking about what are the possibilities of what's going to happen next. And he remembers that his neighbor likes to take a nice warm bath right at this time of day. So perhaps his neighbor will get mad if he knocks on the door, especially when he comes to find out it's only because Ernie wants to borrow a vacuum cleaner. And so then he starts to worry about that. And then he thinks about whether or not should he really knock on the door, not knock on the door. And then finally he kind of gets disgusted with his neighbor about how his neighbor's making life so difficult for him by, being annoyed about having to answer the door while he's taking a bath. Of course, none of this has happened yet. This is just Ernie worrying. And so finally, Ernie's neighbor comes out. He hasn't knocked on the door. He just comes out spontaneously. And Ernie just yells at him and says, thanks a lot. I don't even want your stupid vacuum cleaner, and walks off. So we want to become aware of these kinds of conversations because they don't help. They make us create suffering scenarios unnecessarily because they're not based on anything that's actually happening. We've got the baby in the room. Now we're all distracted. Thank you for bringing in the little distraction. How's Bodhi doing? Good. So by practicing attentive, this mindfulness practice of the body and the feeling, and then we start looking at what's arising in the mind. we can start to notice, this kind of process that goes on and get ahead of it so that we can interrupt our tendency to worry or our tendency to predict misery in the future. If I even ask a favor, I'm going to get, in trouble, whatever it is, so that we can choose our actions based on more accurate information. So using Ernie, what could have Ernie done? What were some of his choices that he ignored?
He could have gone and bought a new vacuum cleaner.
Well, he could have gone and bought a new vacuum cleaner. That's the American way. I don't need help. I'll just buy something else. Yeah, that's a choice.
He could have just come back later if he thought that this was going to be an inconvenient time.
So that's one thing. So he had the mindfulness. Ernie remembered that his neighbor took a warm bath at this time. So he could have decided right then, oh, this might not be a good time to ask. I think I'll wait till later. And so that's being attentive to the needs of others. And then, so you can choose. Well, I don't think this is a good time, so I won't do it.
He probably doesn't know for a fact that he bathes every day at that time, so he might have just knocked on the door.
He could have done that too. He could have said, I don't really, know, so I can take the chance. What is that usually driven by?
My desire to get that vacuum cleaner.
Yes, because that's what I want. Because I want to vacuum now. So we do it based on self-interest. So this often happens. We ignore the information we have about others because it's not convenient. It doesn't suit us right now. And so we need to take that into account. I mean, these are the ways in which we can make choices. By attending to ourselves and then attending to others. Having mindfulness about both. Remembering. Mindfulness just means remembering. And so, yeah.
I have a question, because I was away for that little Ernie thing. The question is, if the mind is like Ernie.
No, the mind can't be like Ernie.
Well, Ernie has his own.
No, the mind can be like Ernie's mind.
Like Ernie's mind, that's what I meant. That chatter of if this and if that and if this and let's say between the man taking whoever it was.
He was never in the conversation.
Right, and there was an agreement, okay? Do you think that it was just over the vacuum cleaner really itself?
Yeah.
It was?
Yeah. Because this is what we do.
Okay.
We don't need anything else to worry. We can just immediately have a need. Okay. We happen to know that somebody else happens to have what we need.
Okay.
And then we go from there. It has nothing to do with whether they have agreed in the past to loan me their vacuum cleaner when mine breaks or anything. I mean, that could all be going on, but that's not the point here. The point here is we have a situation and we start to guess how it's going to unfold. And then what happens?
Make bad guesses. Make bad guesses.
We make bad guesses. Or we actually never let reality unfold. We stop ourselves from acting at all. But except mentally.
Yeah.
Mentally, we still have the conversation going on. And then we get angry with someone else or get disappointed about how they've let us down when actually nothing's taken place. And this is the danger about letting our mind chase after a thought that has no basis in reality. Because we act from these places. We assume if we think it, there's some validity to it. That's the first mistake. We don't have to believe everything we think because we're often wrong. Now, there may be other factors going on, but generally we're bringing our own filters to situations And the more we're attentive to all of those different things, the better we can assess situations, make better choices, and also just start to change our habits. You know, if your habit energy is to worry, you know, you can start really examining that. Is it beneficial to worry? Does worrying exhaust you? Does worrying make you get stuck, you know, that where you're paralyzed from action because you're so worried that you won't make the right decision, you know? And so you can look at all these different parts of what's going on slowly, and then decide if you want to change a habit. And then you have to put a lot of effort into that. Because just because we want it doesn't mean it's going to just happen, you know. But we can, it means right away when we recognize we actually have choices to be able to choose. You know? So what are some of our obstacles when we're worried?
The ability to do deductive reasoning is clouded,
Mm-hmm.
and so we don't make accurate assessments of the problem.
Exactly so. So, your name?
Beth?
Beth was saying that when we're worrying, our ability to do deductive reasoning is clouded. So we're not able to make an accurate assessment. Does that kind of capture it? Yep. Okay, correct me when I'm wrong. I just try to repeat it for some people who can't hear. So, and that is the point. You know, when we have what's known as disturbing emotions, and why are they called disturbing?
Because they disturb your mind.
Yeah, it's very direct. Because when they arise, the mind is very unpeaceful. The mind becomes agitated and disturbed. So it's, you know, so when these states of mind arise, we can't think clearly. So it's best to just wait it out. So if there's fear, anxiety, you know, whatever it is that's arisen, then it's best to just, oh, I'm a little nervous about doing this. So you wait until that passes, and then you can kind of look at the different options. You know, so if as soon as Ernie thought, oh, I think he likes to take a warm bath at this time, and he realizes, oh, now he's kind of worried about it, then he can take a few deep breaths, wait a minute, and go, okay, well, maybe this isn't a good time to knock on the door, because I'm afraid he won't like me if I knock on the door while he's taking his bath. I mean, that's a perfectly reasonable choice. You know, if that's the fear, you can look at that. And then if it's like, oh, but you know, if the fear is, if I don't get that vacuum cleaner, you know, and vacuum up all that broken glass in my house, somebody's going to get hurt. Then you might decide, well, I'm going to risk it. You know. And so when you decide that, what are you risking?
Alienating your friend.
Yeah, your friend might get mad. We can't control that part. You know. But we don't know. So we can get ourselves, worries and things like that can get us ourselves tied up in knots, and we don't act. And then often we get mad at the other person for being a condition for getting tied up in knots and not acting. We blame them, even though they haven't been involved at all. So we want to start noticing if we have this tendency. And so mindfulness of the body and mindfulness of feeling can help us start to be clued in to all the information our experience is providing. And then our habit energy, we can see if we have the habit of overthinking things or not thinking through things. You know, sometimes we overthink, sometimes we could have thought longer, you know? So it's both directions. And then when we start to go, you know, bring our mindfulness one step further with mindfulness of the mind and actually look at what thoughts arise. You know, so we have a pleasant sensation. And then what thought follows that? Where does it lead us?
Typically, I'll have another.
Oh, I like this. I'll follow this thought. But that's not, we don't just choose the pleasant ones, do we? You know, we often, you know, choose the unpleasant and kind of rehearse our anger or frustration and follow those. So it's kind of interesting. We're quite a mixture, aren't we? Nicole, can you find a way through?
Sorry.
Okay. So one of the things that we tend to gravitate towards, if you have any interest in things like Buddhism, is meditation, quiet meditation on the breath. Because then we don't have to really worry about what we're thinking at all. And it's very restful. And it's an excellent place to start. And it's also an excellent way to train our minds in being able to hold our concentration on the chosen object. You know, we picked an object, we keep bringing our attention back to the object, which is that sensation of the breath. And then by letting everything else, it's not that it stops, it just falls to the background. You know, we get some rest there. We're not so busy in the, you know, reacting to everything that's coming up in the mind. Unfortunately, this doesn't help us change. It's not enough to be able to sit quietly in an undisturbed state. Because what happens when you get up?
Starts all over again.
Yeah, and if you haven't trained your mind in any way or transformed your mind in any way to deal with what comes up, then your tendencies will once again take over and you'll just keep reacting in the same old way. So we need to do both, you know, stabilizing concentration meditation so that we can really develop our ability to hold an object of mind. And then we need to do what's called in Tibetan Buddhism analytical meditation, where we do more contemplation and really try to understand what's going on, so that then we can, you know, using reasoning, you know, decide whether or not a certain tendency is something we want to continue to do, or something that perhaps we want to try to shift. So in Buddhism, basically, the teachings, you know, when you simplify them down, it comes down to that unskillful states of mind or disturbing states of mind are those that do harm to ourselves or others. So that takes, you know, so you have to investigate that to see, because we often think we don't do any harm. And so we want to look, is that true? And we want to look at our rationalizations, you know, to see if we're, you know, making up things to make it seem like we're not doing any harm, or that our action is for the better good. So that can justify this little bit of harm, because overall we're going to be doing a better thing. You know, whatever. We come up with excuses to act in the way we want to act because we think we're going to get something from it that we want and that we need. Any questions? Surely there's some. Lamo can't be the only one who goes, but it's good to see you.
Thank you.
It's an extremely interesting situation with the whole idea about not thinking forward. I mean, the whole idea of planning, allowing yourself to run down that rabbit hole, because I know after 30 years in a business school that we train point-blank students to do what-if scenarios. I mean,
Oh yeah, that's how we plan.
Their whole lives were sort of built around Excel spreadsheets and what-ifs, and it was all forward-looking. So it was taking that mindset back one. is a tough thing, I think.
Well, yeah, I mean, you have, this is where you want to investigate. Is all planning useless? No. We need to plan. So it's really about being able to assess if I'm just not experiencing anything now, because I'm always thinking about the future, as if endless plans help, or that there's ever any stop to a plan, that kind of thing, like which sometimes implies we're trying to find the perfect plan, which is not realistic. Yeah, so that's true. We are trained in work to plan ahead, to think through our schedules, do all that kind of thing. And that's important. We need to do that.
Well, then you're evaluating all the different options. But if we're, Ernie is going over to the neighbor's house, all of a sudden he's developing his expectations as to what the outcome are going to be. And that's where,
yes.
getting into trouble.
So making it a distinction between expectation and planning is an important distinction to make. Yeah.
I said for me, when I come to this scenario, I realize that, planning for, per se, like, spending money is something that's essential and necessary. But planning my emotional states is not a good thing. Because, like, if I get this, then I'll be content. Or if this happens, then it'll be okay. That kind of planning, at least in my experience, has tend to not work out so well.
Yeah, so we're setting ourselves up by those kinds of expectations because they're not realistic.
Exactly.
So that's the key. Even in any kind of planning, if part of our plan is to win the Publishers House clearing, which I'm really working on because it's free. It's not gambling. So why not? So I sit there going, yeah, I could use $15 million. I know a lot of people who could benefit from that. But if my financial planning is based on that, I'm in serious trouble. Because it's not based on anything in reality. Yes?
It reminds me of a saying I heard once. Expectations are premeditated resentments.
Oh, that's good. Expectations are premeditated resentments. Yes. So, this is the thing. And then we have the reverse. That's the most common scenario, right? Because expectations, in a way, set us up to be disappointed because it's hard to match expectations if we're looking for something positive. It's funny how if we have the expectation of something negative, it seems like, that's fulfilled rather often. Why would that be?
We project it.
And what does that do?
Again, it's setting them up for...
It's that self-fulfilling prophecy. If you have a filter that expects that this is not going to go well, you might interpret things that are going just fine as they're not going well. That's, you just see it that way. You see it through a negative filter. You judge the tone, the types of words the other person uses, all through this negative filter. So, like you were saying earlier, we become clouded to the reality. And that's what aversion is. Aversion is defined as exaggerating the negative aspects of a situation. Yes?
I sitting here thinking, and since I believe, this is just my belief, that the outside reality, our conventional reality, and ultimate reality are two
sides of the same coin.
Two of the same. So therefore, using the word expect or expectation, I think there can be, without all that emotional extras, reasonable expectations, because otherwise, then there would be no such thing as planning. You can plan, but for, an example, take the center and how it operates, and you need to plan to make let's say who runs, you have a meeting, okay? So you ask
Yeah,
And
yeah.
you need, I think somewhere human beings need that answer. It's not an expecting of an emotional thing, but an answer in order to have that.
I still think it depends. I mean, I
Yes,
think that there's a
everything
certain element,
depends.
but that's just part of the plan. The plan is that Nicole will run the meeting, you know, and these people will show up and da-da-da-da-da. But it's,
Everything depends, correct?
well, right,
Yeah.
but the trouble is that when we have an expectation, we're actually deciding on an outcome. I think that's the distinction. You may not use the word that way,
Mm-hmm.
but I think most people do. Yes, Christine?
I think it's more the attachment to the expectation that's
Oh,
the
it's
issue.
always the
Yeah.
attachment that's the problem.
I mean, you can have expectations, it's one thing to have expectations, it's another thing to be attached to those expectations.
Sure.
And I think that's a big part of it. If-
Yes, it's
if,
absolutely true.
You know, whoever's supposed to run the meeting doesn't come, it's not gonna devastate you,
Yeah.
you're not attached to whoever's running the
Yeah.
meeting.
That's a very important
Yeah,
distinction to
yeah.
make. So Christine's making the distinction between being attached to an expectation or averse to an expectation, you know, and the actual expectation. It's like, for me, that it's like, I trust that people stop at red lights.
That's your expectation. Yes.
I mean, that's how we drive.
Yeah,
We
exactly.
function, that, you know, we can, you know, in order to even risk getting in a car, we base that risk on the reasonable assumption that people follow traffic rules, you know? Being attached to that, it kind of means that when someone gets distracted and runs a red light, we hate them for it. You know, we think that, oh, nothing can work if, you know, because what's underlying a particular attached expectation is that it's the only acceptable outcome.
Yeah.
Is that realistic?
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Why?
Well, because if you have the expectation that there can be one outcome in any given situation.
Okay, let's just take the traffic.
Well, in the traffic, well, you have no idea how it's gonna unfold.
Why?
Because you're in South Florida.
Maybe causes and conditions.
Why?
Causes and conditions.
Yeah, but what's one of the main ones?
Driver's heads.
Drivers.
Yeah.
What is it about drivers?
They're not perfect.
They're not perfect.
No machines out there.
We're not, we make mistakes. Even the machines make
Yeah,
mistakes.
yeah.
So the idea that there's some way to create a traffic pattern and traffic rules and traffic lights and cars and everything else such that there's never an accident again is an unrealistic
Yeah.
expectation.
I think I have a really good example of expectation and attachment to it in aversion. I took students to other places for years, and the first time I ever went to Belgium with a group, wonderful food, stunningly good food, and I knew this. I had one child in that group who didn't eat anything that was not in her suitcase for a week. Everything she ate was out of her suitcase for a week. Her expectations were clearly negative. She was attached to them, and she starved after that week was up.
Yeah, or she
Yeah.
had
She
celiac
started to-
disease and
she-
felt like she
exactly.
couldn't trust,
But
you
it was
know,
a
what she
strange
ate.
thing, yeah.
You know, so we, you know, this idea that we know what's going on for other people, that, you know, it's like, you know, we need to understand that those are scenarios that where we're setting ourselves up to be shocked or startled or unreasonably angry over the turn of events, so to speak, you know. And then we get jarred by life constantly. You know, like, oh, what do you mean Nicole's sick and she didn't show up to the meeting? You know? You know, and then we want to control it. You should have called me. Then you see item 4 on the rule list that says, you must call Tendrin, you know? And if you don't reach her by phone, you send up a flare that says, hey, you know, because Tendrin can't be inconvenienced by showing up to a meeting that's not going to happen. You know, so, you know, this is what we need to look at is how we, I mean, you know, If you haven't noticed before, I exaggerate for the purposes of effect. But, in some ways that's not true, because sometimes that's exactly how my mind is operating. What? Nobody told me? So we want to, the more we become skilled at sort of having a part of our mind in the background looking at what's going on, the more we can see when we're creating suffering for ourselves. The more we can see that we had unrealistic expectations, or we can notice that we're headed that way because of the story we're starting to follow in our heads. So it's useful to look. And it takes a little practice because we are busy. And so our minds are, and we have the tendency to let our minds just race all day long, and we never pay attention really to any of it. It's just kind of this ongoing thing. But it's actually influencing, the way we are feeling, the way we're responding to events.
It's exhausting.
It's exhausting. This is why mindfulness of the breath can be so restful. And it's always there, hopefully. Well, if we're here, the breath is working on some level. So it's available to us wherever we are to just, if we feel ourselves getting hooked by something or going down, a path that's probably not very useful, then we can just take a moment, just like our moms told us, count to 10. We can just bring our minds back to the breath, feel grounded, and then observe again, and then make better choices. So that's the this beneficial side effect of developing this habit. Oh, he's so cute. Oh, seriously, cute. And he knows where, we want to pick good distractions at least.
So is it considered conventional reality that when we walk in a room and we see a chair, we presume that the chair isn't gonna break underneath us? Or when we take an elevator, that the elevator is gonna get us to the floor that we wanna get to, like the same with the traffic?
I'm not sure it's a conventional reality. I think the reality is it may break.
The reality is it may break.
And the reality is it may not break.
But we do function as if these things weren't.
Because they exist. The elevator exists, and its function is to go up and down, and, we probably wouldn't use them at all if they didn't work at all, so they do, so yes, I mean, it's a reasonable, in other words, we have to trust that most of the time, most of the things that we choose to do are not gonna kill us. But we also wanna be aware that they could.
That isn't considered a conventional perception of reality, that the things that we do aren't going to kill us, that most people would consider that to be their reality. That isn't a conventional.
Yeah, it'd be conventionally true.
It is.
Except when it's not.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we learn that the circumstances we're in have, like if you travel, you may go someplace else, and like the first time I traveled when I was 16, I went to live in France for the summer. And I didn't know a lot about France, and apparently I knew even less about French, but I kind of did my best. Anyway, but one of the things that I really didn't know anything about were bathrooms without toilets. So going into restaurant bathrooms and having no toilet, all of these things was new to me. So this idea in my head that when you walk into the bathroom there are toilets was wrong. That, because it wasn't the case for these bathrooms. So, it's So conventional truth about bathrooms in France was different, you know. So, but when we talk about conventional reality and ultimate reality, we're not talking about two different things. We're talking about two sides of the same thing. So this cup has a conventional reality. We all, by convention, agree this is a cup. In France, we'd all, by convention, agree that it's a tasse, or la tasse, or something. I'm sure they have a different word for this kind of cup. But I can't even think of what it is in English, so, you know, I was going somewhere. Ultimate, conventional. So these are, by convention, accepted as truth. Okay? But the cup also has an ultimate reality. The ultimate reality is that it does not exist inherently. It does not exist from its own side. These are all very nice little phrases that take a lot of contemplation about what they really mean. But basically, you know, it's a dependent arising. It's not like, there's not some point in that dependent arising where it becomes this cup, permanent, this cup, concrete, independent of anything else. No, it's a dependent arising. It will abide for a while as a cup, and then it will cease to be a cup. And in fact, moment to moment, it's arising and disintegrating because of physics. You know, we understand that because of physics, not because of physics. Physics describes what happens. Yes?
So is conventional reality then is culture bound?
No, I mean, it's just, yes, it's by convention. It's literally what that means in English, you know, that it's accepted by convention.
So what an umbrella, conventional reality, one umbrella in one culture may be to protect you from the sun, the conventional reality in another would be rain.
Protection from the rain.
And how is that different again from the ultimate reality?
The ultimate reality is the fact that those two things can exist is the ultimate truth. The fact that it's all a dependent arising, it doesn't have its own nature coming from its own side or by way of its characteristics. It is merely imputed by language and conception. So in one country, it's a sunshade. In another country, it's a rain protection. Rain shade.
Yeah.
So it's being labeled. But it's not just that we use different words or different functions for it. It's really just that we attribute something. What ignorance is that we take things like this and we cover it with some sort of like fixed story about it. You know, it's as if at some point in the manufacturing process it became my cup.
Or when you paid for it.
Or in my case, accepted it as a gift.
Well done.
So, you know, yes, and this paying for it, this shows you how quick we are. I mean, as soon as we pay for it, it's mine, don't you hurt it. You know? My sister-in-law, no, that's not right, my stepsister, they bought 2 or 3 cars and it got in a wreck, like within a half a block of the dealership. Which of course, as we all learn, it's definitely your car. And it definitely is not worth much anymore. So, yeah. But so we have this habit that, you know, assigns this sort of like, this is mine. And from there, all sorts of things can happen. As soon as we think mine, what does that mean? Not yours. Mine. What are you doing with my cup? Didn't we have the same cup for a while? That was kind of annoying to me.
And I'll have this cup forever.
And I'll have this cup forever. Now, obviously, we know with physical things that's not true. I mean, we're not idiots, you know, we know that. But we still get sad when the car gets wrecked or the cup breaks or the, you know, because there's a part of us that's always holding on to this sense of permanence in things that we like.
My life is
My life.
It's a really good
Yes,
one.
my life. Yes, Lamo.
I'm hearing all the comments, and just from how I look at things of attachment, I don't think it's necessarily the umbrella, because I've traveled a bit, and you see an umbrella, and the way it functions, whether you're in China or whether you're here, I've never seen anybody open and try to wear it as a pair of pants. Usually after
That's
a
why
while.
by convention it's accepted as an umbrella.
Exactly, and also the cup, unless it has a hole in it, people, okay, maybe they might shower, maybe they might drink, but
Make
really it's-
sandcastles with it.
Right, but I think the attachment has to do more with that it's inherently existed.
That's what I'm talking about.
Right, not so
I'm just
much-
obviously not being clear to you. So, yeah, because that is what I'm
Yeah.
talking about, that there's nothing from the side of this cup that says cup. We just conventionally accept it as a cup, which means, like you said, it doesn't have a hole in the bottom. It can hold stuff, and no matter where in the world you are or what it's called in that world, it functions in a particular way. And so whether we decide that it's something to hold liquids, or whether we decide it's something to hold sand, make shapes on the ocean, it still has a certain, there's a similarity in what it can do, So yes, absolutely. That it's not there's nothing about the cup. It's our interpretation of things, that becomes the problem. And it's generally not about the small stuff. We get over the small stuff in an appropriate length of time, usually. Unless you're a baby.
Well, what then
They
is
do
the big
even better, actually.
What's the big stuff?
What's the big stuff? What are you attached to? Relationships.
Work.
Work. Is that aversion or attachment? They're both forms of
Yes.
attachment. Yes, good answer. Yeah. So relationships exist. That's the conventional reality. We make partnerships. We have all kinds of relationships. Oh, look how cute. I keep getting distracted by the baby. I really do. It's really like a magnet. So having relationships isn't a problem. Enjoying relationships is not a problem. Where does it become a problem?
Relating to people.
When they end.
Attachment.
When they end? I didn't catch what you said, Dave.
I said relating to people, I guess.
Relating to
What I mean
people.
by that is, what actually the nuts and bolts of having one.
Yeah, relationships are not easy. It's not like you decide, oh, I want a relationship with this person, and it just goes well.
When we perceive them as solid and separate, and they aren't, they don't follow the impermanence, we don't perceive them as impermanent, as constantly changing, and that they aren't solid, but our being isn't solid, the cup isn't solid, none of it is actually what we tend to think of it as we use it in conventional reality.
Yeah. So this is the thing, is that once we label something, like a relationship, that has certain meaning to us, to each of us individually. We've created a story around that word. Some of it's based in conventional reality, Some of it is based on expectation. Some of it's based on previous relationships. So we have this whole package of stuff in our concept of relationship. We don't just experience a moment of interaction with another person. At some point, many little moments of interaction with a person becomes a relationship. And then we have this idea, somewhere we have this idea that there's some that it contains certain characteristics. So instead of experiencing each moment of the relationship as it unfolds, we kind of compare it to our conception of the relationship. And then we decide you're not living up to your part of the relationship, or we can't do that because that's not how we play this game. You know, so you can see it in an exaggerated form in the character of Sheldon on Big Bang Theory. You know, the roommate agreement. You know, but we all are kind of doing this in our minds to a lesser or greater extent. And so we, you know, so we it's not that there's any reason not to have a certain well, I was gonna say there's nothing wrong with the idea that you have an expectation that when you run across this person, they'll acknowledge your existence, you know, and say hello. But there can be, even something as small as that can be a problem, because sometimes it doesn't happen. And if we think that's a marker of this relationship, then we think we've done something wrong, or they've done something wrong, or they don't like us anymore, or, you know, and we start to make up stories about why is this happening, you know. So that's why communication is so important. Yeah, Chris.
In this context, I relate to it like this. Anytime I look at something and I say, well, that shouldn't be that way, that's kind of silly. I mean, even if you see somebody arguing or, per se, worse yet, hitting each other, and you say to yourself, well, that shouldn't be that way. Unfortunately, it is. You know? But at that present moment.
At that moment.
Yes, at that moment. And so I can't say it, even though it's not ideal and that's not how I would handle it. If I say, well, that shouldn't happen, but it is happening at that moment. You know, and then you get mad and upset. You know, because it's, this isn't
Because
the way
it's
it
not,
should
yes,
be.
it's not unfolding like we want it to unfold. Again, there's no problem with having preferences. The problem is when we combine that with an expectation that those preferences are met. You know.
That's when you get the 911 calls for domestic violence. But
Yeah.
those are very dangerous.
Yeah. But it happens way before that. It starts way before that. Yes.
I was just thinking there's kind of an inherent contradiction in the whole concept of relationships and the whole concept of the interaction that is defined by the term relationship, because the whole concept of a relationship is that there are allegedly these two separate people, let's say. Okay, we don't have to be technical or too particular, in my opinion at least, about how separate they are or they aren't, but they're communicating and trying to work together to have some kind of understanding mutually between one another. But usually when people think of relationships, they think of my relationship. They don't think of necessarily our relationship, even our relationship.
Even if they use the word our
A bit of a
relationship,
stretch.
it still might be really thinking about
it's
my
like,
relationship.
You know, the relationship's happening to me because everything is first person and this is all based around me in my mind. And so even the relationship, so even though I'm supposedly relating to you,
Okay.
really I'm wanting you to relate to me in a particular way.
Okay, so this gets back to the fundamental point. So Dave's bringing up the fact that relationships, that one of the key ingredients of problems in relationships is that we tend to look at them from the point of view of my relationship as opposed to our relationship, recognizing the interdependence of it. True. Yeah. And this is true of everything, of course. That one of our difficulties is that we relate to the world through the filter of self, you know, and we grasp at a self. And then that means everybody else is other. You know, even though everybody in this room is a self, and everybody in this room is an other, So there's really no real difference other than the name, depending on the point of view. I'm the self and y'all are all others, you know. And this is an artificial separation. So it's helpful one of the reasons it's helpful to look inward and look at your own thoughts and your own reactions and your own concepts and your own sensations is to recognize that that's how everybody else is feeling too. Not in the same moments, but that just like me, if I'm upset or agitated, then I come from a suffering place, and sometimes my speech is not nice and sometimes my actions aren't nice. That's true for other people as well, because they're really not much different than I am. We may have different histories, we may have a different style, we may have a different language, we may have a different, you know, on and on. But fundamentally, you know, we all have feelings, we all have thoughts, we all have bodies, you know, we have physical sensations, we have mental sensations, we have the desire for happiness, we have the desire for pleasant experiences, we would like to be separated from negative experiences, from unpleasant feelings. So the reason to go inward doesn't stay there. The reason is to go inward is to develop more compassion and understanding for ourselves and everybody else. Because we can, the Buddha said, with confidence, we can, you know, that if we feel that way, you know, if we have this feeling, not about what, not the story, not what, you know, was the condition for the feeling or the ripening of what karmic result or whatever, that everybody is trying to find happiness and pleasurable feelings and trying to avoid unhappiness. And we don't know what we're doing. You know, we're doing the best we know how to do, but often we're mistaken about how to get those things. And we hurt others trying to get them, or try to being separated from them, you know, whatever it is, whether it's, you know, the attachment that's desire or the attachment that's aversion. So the more we become familiar with what's going on within our inner sphere, the more we can also understand what's going on in others. We just can't read their minds, so we don't know when that's happening, but we can bet that it happens. And this can help us feel less separated from each other, that we're all in the same boat. Not only that, we're deeply interconnected. We know that people's moods and behaviors affect everybody that's around them. So in the same way, our moods and behavior affects everybody around us. And these things are important to recognize. And so the more that we can respond to things as they unfold, instead of how we think they're going to unfold, you know, the more that we can listen to someone without thinking about what we want to say next, and actually first listen, pause, and then respond if there's a response needed. The more that we can look at circumstances as they unfold before just reacting with, oh, that's a problem, I've got to fix that problem, but really live with, you know, the moment for a moment, you know. So, and this is why getting in touch with, allowing ourselves to notice when anxiety is arising or fear is arising or concern is arising, whatever label you want to put on it, to wait a moment till that subsides a little so you can get the pertinent details of what's actually unfolding. Because we will make better choices if we can be clear about what's happening. And also we can recognize when, you know, oh, you know, like that phone call that comes that so-and-so, you know, is in the hospital and you know, and then we're really, you know, there's this huge fear, you know, we can recognize that, okay, I wasn't told what the situation was, you know, but we can separate the parts. Like there's a part of me that's afraid of losing this person, and that's all about me, you know. There's a part of me that wants to know how I can help this person, you know. There's, you know, we have different parts, and we want to look at those so that we can come from a place of more calm mind. Because as we've talked about many times, there's a benefit from coming from a calm place. We're less likely to be clouded. Well, we're more likely to know when we need more information, you know, as opposed to we're guessing and trying to plan for every contingency, but we actually don't have enough information. You know, so we need to try to find, you know, recognize that we can respond quickly, effectively. What other things are we afraid of not being able to respond intelligently? From a calm place, not just an agitated place. In fact, when we're agitated, we're not going to respond as well, you know? That the more we're able to, okay, calm down, it's not going to help if I get killed in a car accident on the way to the hospital, you know? And if you can't, you know, then you call a friend and say, I need to get to the hospital and I'm in no condition to drive. Or you call a taxi cab, you know? You try to find other options. So it's just about knowing what's going on for you so that you can make better decisions.
Could you maybe talk a little bit about how to interact with people who might perceive, for example, a relationship as a cup, in other words, just there to be used by the person for the purposes that that person thinks it's to be used for, and not have the knowledge of Buddhism and interdependence? How do you, what kind of thoughts do you have about that kind of way of interacting with people who don't have this?
Well, I mean, we have to interact with people where they are.
Right.
So we work on ourselves and try not to harm them. I mean, it's really, you know, we just, you know, we need to be as direct as we can be, you know, and that requires us really knowing what's going on for ourselves and then fess up. You know, like when you go, I'm sorry, I wasn't listening. Can you repeat that? You know, we have to just fess up instead of trying to guess what a good answer might be, you know, or we have to say, you know, what I need is this. It's not about trying to, you know, and it would, you know, I would love to hear what you need, you know, so we can model what might be helpful, you know, in good communication. Yeah.
And what if they're not talking to you?
Then there's nothing you can do, is there? You can model again from your behavior that perhaps you don't have any, that you're open to conversation, but if they're not willing, there's not much you can do. We can't force people to cooperate. Yeah.
I was just thinking that's the best thing you can do in that situation is to not communicate.
Well,
how many people are like, you need to hear this now, you need to know how I feel.
yeah, I mean, we have to be cautious about how we push our ideas on others. And if somebody's not willing to talk to us, there's nothing much we can do. We can't force them into the room, lock the door, and say, now you're going to talk to me. Now, maybe we do that with children. But it's not probably the most effective strategy. So it's, you know, there's not much we can do if they won't talk to us. You know, you can always try to find out what would be a condition in which they're willing to talk to us. You know, if that opportunity presents itself.
And Tina, a week or two ago, I think you responded to a person with regard to this sort of situation and said if it's a toxic person, there's absolutely nothing wrong with you removing yourself from that person.
Yeah, or a toxic situation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but you know, if you are open to a conversation and you want to communicate with someone, it still requires the other person to want to also.
Yeah.
They don't have to want to as much as you do, Yes, Christine.
I think going back to what you were saying is that we're all suffering, we're all in the same boat, and having compassion for that person who don't understand the teachings of Buddhism, have never been exposed, it's just to have compassion for them that they don't know.
They don't have the same tools that we have, and so
Right.
that's a great condition for
And
compassion.
so that's, and that's what helps me to work with people that I don't get along with, is that they don't know any better, and then I'm like, well, they I tell them about Buddhism and they can do it, but they're not ready for it, and if they're not ready for it, there's nothing you can do about it, but you can have compassion that they're not ready for it.
And there's not just one way.
Yeah.
Other people might develop wisdom in another way. I mean, it's not like our way is the only way. So we need to be very aware of that sometimes we give off a vibe that says, if you don't do it my way, then you're doing it wrong. That's not so good. Yeah.
Unsolicited advice is usually considered intrusive.
Yeah, and that's absolutely true. If it's unasked for, if nobody wants, even the teachings. No one's supposed to give a Buddhist teaching without being asked 3 times. For that very reason. That if someone else doesn't want to hear it, has no sincere interest in it, we go on the assumption that if you show up here, then you're interested in hearing, to a certain extent. That we're not forcing something on you.
Going back to expectation and in relation to relationships, there's a hard lesson, and that is not to expect anybody to change or to think that you can change somebody.
Yeah, that's really key. Not to think you can change anybody. People do change, but they don't necessarily change in the direction you'd like them to change. Yeah. Yes, Mom.
Oh, no, I wasn't raising my head.
You're just comfortable. Yes.
For once, I was just sitting.
All right. Yes, Chris.
I think you made a very good point, because no one tradition owns the qualities of patience, kindness, and equanimity. It just so happens to be that maybe those of us here like the way this one is put together. And
It suits our disposition of mind.
Yes.
Yeah.
So thinking that, they're not doing it my way, so they can't be going the right way, that's silly.
But it's definitely true that because, and often what we see in others is not healthy behavior or healthy speech or whatever. Often we notice it because we know we're not very strong in that area either. And so it's a wonderful opportunity to go, okay, maybe I understand this better now, why this isn't skillful. You don't say that out loud. You just reflect on how this might help you transform. And then if you see someone who does something very well, you notice that every time you have a conversation with this person, it seems to really go well. You feel comfortable. Then you might want to look, what is it they do? What is it? How do they establish a comfortable, friendly, safe condition? And then you want to try to emulate that. So it's every moment is an opportunity to learn. Everybody can teach us things, so but it requires an openness on our part, and so that's why it's so important not to be thinking what I'm going to say next or in response, because then you just miss it. You miss the opportunity. Now you're
oh, thank you. Many times, most of the time, I relate to His Holiness. It just speaks to my heart from when I was first heard him. And in the last 10 years especially, he keeps reminding the world that to dialogue and to look at things in a secular, especially in the 21st century, to say even to say that's a bad person. For myself, how do I know? And what is bad? It's all dependent upon the person's interpretation, and I think if people really learned what he's saying to sincerely dialogue, you know, which I know half the time I don't, you know, I think I am, but like, and then I go, I try to remember what they said.
Right.
Being
That's a
true,
clue.
you know, if you're truly honest with yourself,
Right.
which to get anywhere, whether it's in Buddhism or it doesn't matter, even if you're atheist, even if, you know, to anywhere in the you know, to the level of consciousness where maybe you do want to get to really help others for the basis of their benefit, you know, not just on who's around,
Right.
you know. If you do, I think when you know, I hear many people, oh, I don't like to watch the news. I think it's very important to watch the news, not to sit there and watch the talking
Okay.
heads all the, but if you don't know what's happening, I think it's like sort of very ignorant, you know, in a way, can be very ignorant.
Well, now we're back to whether something's good or bad.
Right,
And it just depends on your own perspective.
Yeah, not to say whether it's good or bad, but just to have a knowledge that we are one earth.
Right.
You know, what the Dalai Lama means, secular.
7 billion.
Yeah, that's a
human
lot
beings.
of people. That's a lot of human beings.
So, and you say you're alone?
You know, so I think that's what he means by secular, just the understanding that it's not just like, you know, that ripple effect goes all the way to
Yes, and
galaxies.
Yes,
or
and what faith you have, or what religion you have, or what, your ethics, that all these things, and what's really reassuring, I guess, to me, is that most faith traditions value the same human qualities and promote the same ones, you know, kindness and compassion and unafflicted, you know, afflicted love, unconditional love is the way to phrase that, right? You know, that we, you know, being generous, being patient, helping each other, you know, thinking of others first, you know, rising to the occasion in crisis, you know, all those things. So I think, and what you said about this, you know, His Holiness often says about authentic, if you sincerely want to listen to someone else, if you sincerely want to try to understand their point of view, it's not about perfecting your style. It's about throwing your heart open to being able to really listen to that, you know. So it's, so we have to challenge ourselves to keep checking up, you know. Have I stopped listening? Have I only wanted to promote my point of view, you know, and I'm not really interested in their point of view, you know, that kind of thing, so that we can, and this is true even on the small scale of just between two people, you know, of really being able, especially like if you hit sort of like a stalemate where you kind of go, you know, it's so important to relax and go, I'm just not getting it, you know, and be okay with that. You know, kind of like, I'm for whatever reason, because it could be a personal obstacle. You know, I told y'all how, you know, the first year of my studies in Australia, I never heard the word emptiness. Every time I'd get to the weekend and we'd get our transcripts of the teachings, and there'd be these things about emptiness, and I'd go, was I in the room? I just had an obstacle. I could not hear any of those teachings. It was really kind of hilarious. So sometimes we just miss it. We don't hear it. We can't quite take it in, you know, so we have to be patient and take another opportunity to try to go again. I mean, it's just, you know, we don't always get it the first time it's explained to us. We come from different places with different assumptions and different, all sorts of stuff, different language. Boy, words are just a mess. And, you know, it's very hard to communicate directly, you know, and if, you know, and then I like to think, oh, if I was telepathic, well, that would just scare y'all all. So I don't think that would be any better. So it's just, you know, not yet. So anyway, but so it's just, it's about first going inward and then recognizing that we're not so different. So that if we have this kind of suffering, others do too, you know, and being able to be more flexible moment to moment, You know, instead of worrying how something is unfolding, just experience the unfolding and choose your responses, and you know, in the most skillful way you can, you know how, kind of thing. So it's a process. Okay. I spent yesterday talking all day. You know, not that I hate that, but it's just, you know, I'm tired. I'm really tired of my own voice. So you're not alone in your thinking. I'm also really tired of my own voice. So anyway, so we're almost finished. So let's take a moment and introduce ourselves to each other so that we might recognize each other next time. So if you don't know the person next to you, introduce yourself. I bet you don't. Well, if you think.
There he is.
Everybody's introducing themselves to Cody on that side of the room. He's very popular. Okay. Has everybody met someone new?
Yes.
Excellent. And I'm still taking over here. I would try to show off and show you how many names I know, but I failed today. So I'd be embarrassed. Anyway, but I heard this is Marty and Beth, and this is Dave and Gina, and Lou, and Steve, and Bill, Ann. Hi, Ann. This is Chris. This is Ralph. Bobby. Don, Sean, John, John, Jack, John, Christy, Jane, sorry, Chad. Okay, Lamo, or Cheryl, Brian. You know, sometimes I can't remember anybody's name. Cecilia, Debbie, Nicole, Roy, Gino, Louisa, Iman, Kevin, and this is Bodie.
The star of the session.
And then, yes, no doubt. And Melissa. And is that everybody?
That's pretty impressive.
I'm working on it. I'm not very good at it. Anyway, I use the rationalization that I've always worked in confidential professions, and so I wasn't supposed to remember anybody's name. But that was really a rationalization. So, because it's nice if you remember their name, you just don't mention it. So, anyway, that's my excuse. All right. So we didn't even read the 4 measurables today, did we?
No.
You know, sometimes I'm really just not very on it. Okay, so sorry about that. I know you were all thinking, though, that may all sentient beings be happy and be, you know, have the causes of happiness. But so we'll do dedication prayers anyway, because they're nice. So what we like to do is to try to think that our positive activity of like just even thinking about what our mind is doing, which is, you know, according to Buddhism, a very positive activity, because our actions of speech and body come from our actions of mind. So the more peaceful, the more calm, the more friendly, the more kind, the more patient, the more generous, the more wise our minds are, the, you know, the more positive energy we're putting out in the world. And you know, in Buddhism it's said that these will result in positive things in the future for ourselves, positive resources, positive circumstances, all those kinds of things, good conditions. So we want to give it away, so to other suffering sentient beings. So if someone would, it's on page 246. Oh, I want the one Shantideva. 246?
Yeah, 246.
Okay. So someone start us off, because I don't have a book.
May.
May.
Everywhere, laid by sufferings of body and mind, obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of my merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled, with a mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored and finding repose. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvests. May all medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments. Whatever diseases there are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid, and those bound be freed. May the powerless find power, and may people think of benefiting each other. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I too remain, to dispel the miseries of the world.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for participating. Like I said, we could use some volunteers who are happy to pick people up who need rides to the center on Sundays. Steve right now could use help getting here. He lives in Margate. So if there are people who are willing to bring him here, that would be fabulous. He's usually with Dave, who's been helping him out. But, so we just need a way of getting in touch with you so we can kind of help that happen. So either write down your contact information and give it to Steve, or give it to Dave, or give it to Nicole. We'll get it there. So, what else? Okay, so Tuesday night, those who are in the intermediate class, we're continuing on Joyous Effort. On Thursday night, we are doing Gandala Gema, which is a guru, it's a prayer practice, because it's the anniversary of the Buddha, you know, it's the date that we celebrate the Buddha's first teaching on Thursday. So we're going to do Gandala Gema here. It's all in English, in spite of its name. It's like the 100 deities, the land of joy, something like that. Anyway, but in this particular one, it's basically you're making prayers to, like Lama Tsongkhapa, who is one of our major text writers in this tradition from the 1300s, that we might be able to develop the mind of wisdom, of different kinds of wisdom, quick wisdom, you know. Is there, you know, now I can't think of any of them. So I clearly need to do the practice. So you're welcome to join us. And then next Sunday's the usual, you know. And what is next Sunday? The last Sunday? So there's nothing else with it, right? Okay. And then we start Refuge, Discovering Buddhism on the subject of refuge, a week from Thursday. What other announcements?
I think that's it.
That's it? Okie dokie. So thank you
Thank
again.
you.